So Helen, coming back to as a CISO, the risk surface is something that you talk about all the time and you deal with, right? And again, going back to the discussion over here, where hordes of data is coming in literally every minute, right?
Mhm.
So as a CISO, how do you even kind of keep up with, hey, my risk surface is changing minute to minute, and therefore the detection and the prevention and also the incident response also needs to change accordingly, right? So what's going on in the CISO world right now when it comes to data collection as a risk meter when it comes to security?
We're all learning how to dog paddle. Um, it's definitely a challenge, and I think uh, what we're seeing from a maturity curve is, while we continue to invest in controls that help us identify and protect against threat, there is an acknowledgement, and it's not just that we're cynical, but the evidence would suggest that it doesn't matter how many defenses we put in place, there is going to be something going on. So the more mature security shops are really focusing their active effort on evaluating their own environment, evaluating the effectiveness of the controls that they have, threat hunting, and generally doing what they can do to improve incident response and also mitigation of whatever the impact is. So there's a lot more move towards, how do you, if you acknowledge that stuff's going to happen, how do you help your organization be resilient to that stuff? The data is a blessing and a curse. We definitely have more of it. We have more of it coming from more sources, which helps us put context around it. But you get into this sort of war of numbers. Like, something has to be happening enough, in a big enough way, in a significant enough way, to even get your attention. Otherwise, you're looking for a needle in a sea of needle-based haystacks. And so we're looking to technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us make sense of the noise, but the technology is not there yet. So it's really forcing a CISO to actively make a risk decision to ignore stuff and only focus on certain areas. And that's really what's happening, industry by industry, vertical by vertical, size of organization by size of organization. You're sort of looking at it and going, what's the most likely threat? What's the most likely thing that's going to hurt us the most? And that's where I'm going to focus my energy. And if I happen to suck up other data that helps me discover something, then great. But that's not where I'm going to spend my time. You have to pick and choose. That's what's happening, I think.
So Heather, I mean, again, Helen alluded to this industry by industry, right? So are you seeing widening of gaps in certain industry where, because of the rampant data collection and the ease of data collection, that is at a much faster clip than the ability for a CISO or his or her security organization to keep up?
Was that question for me?
Yes.
Okay, could you repeat? I don't think I quite caught what you were asking.
So going back to what Helen just alluded to, which is industry by industry, vertical by vertical, they're trying to kind of make assessments as to what to go after first, and then just assume the risk is there for the rest. So I'm just asking from an industry vertical perspective. There are certain industries that obviously are much more mature than others. While everybody has equal access to this rampant data collection, the sophistication when it comes to security and cybersecurity awareness is still not as prevalent in certain industries.
Yes.
So so what's the risk over there?
Yes.
I mean, it costs to, I don't know, public utilities, name it, right?
Yes. I think that anybody who works in security often knows that the end user is one of the biggest threats that we face today. And I don't think that people understand the implications of, even things like clicking on links and when they click on a link and they're putting their password, they just don't understand the implications of that. I think that, I spent 18 years of my career in cybersecurity and technology education, and mostly for people that are interested in becoming, technology professionals, cybersecurity professionals. But then also on the other side of that is that, as technology advances, I think the end user is becoming much more, they're becoming much more advanced and much more knowledgeable, but there's still a gap there where, people don't understand even like there's the mindset out there, and I've heard people say this where they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. I only have $10 in my checking account. What's the big deal if they get access to it? It's not a big deal to me. And not understanding, the full implications of, of a security breach. So I think that, I couldn't give an answer across what vertical where we see the least amount of security awareness, I guess. I think it's across the board. I think it's, in any industry that you've got different levels of people where they've got, you've got your highest risk end users, and then you've got some that are, a little bit more knowledgeable, but I don't think you see that across verticals at all. I think it's across the board.
So pivoting to Brian, you, I mean, again, given your deep entrenchment with the educational sector, right? Well, I mean, what is the stuff happening over there? I mean, clearly there's these the curriculum and then the courses about cybersecurity, but then there are practitioners and professionals, and then you have these grants coming like the CARES Act, which suddenly gets people to buy stuff. So how do you see these things kind of molding together, where you have, let's say, the cybersecurity curriculum that's actually helping drive awareness so that the cybersecurity skills gap is reduced? Do you see some connections happening, or are these things kind of happening independent of each other?
That's interesting. I was on a call earlier. We were talking about a certain framework, I guess we could say the attack framework, and how it's being taught and used in the curriculum, but on the operational side, the practitioners haven't really adopted it. And it was interesting. The person said, it's almost like one side of higher ed isn't talking to the other. So we have to bridge that. And I was thinking, as Heather and Helen were talking around from the AI perspective, machine learning, right? It's hard as security folks to be optimistic, right? But is there an opportunity for AI and ML to help? I'm thinking, back to maybe a car analogy, right? So Heather talked about the user still being, at risk of clicking on something or, giving away information in a way that puts us at risk. And I think of, we used to rely on the driver to operate a vehicle safely, but now we've gotten things like lane departure and, braking, and we've augmented that user or that driver with artificial intelligence to make the automobile safer, right? And is there an analogy to where we can get with our academic programs and our operational stuff in cyber to merge those so that the end user is a safer driver on sort of that internet superhighway? So that's sort of my blogging all this together, trying to make a cohesive thought out of it.
Great. So Kevin, I'm going to ask you about something that, you post frequently on LinkedIn, and thanks to the LinkedIn algorithm, I see your posts in my newsfeed periodically. But I want to call out something that I saw, I think yesterday, day before, where one of your connections had talked about evaluating all the browsers, right? They talked about Firefox, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari, Brave. And the thing that got my attention was Safari, I think it was Firefox that got the highest marks, right? And Brave, which I use, was number 3. And I'm thinking it's fairly straightforward. I'm quote unquote reasonably technical. Importing bookmarks is not a big deal. I could move from Brave to Firefox in a heartbeat. And yet I'm not, right? Partly because it's too painful, right? So I'm thinking to myself, right, here is somebody who understands privacy, who can do it, and yet I have more important things to deal with, right? So talk a little bit about, like, how do you go about giving, it was well-written article. It had all the pieces of information, yet I'm anchored to what I'm doing right now, right? And how do you see that change happening?
My purpose in sharing information is not to get you necessarily to change, but it's more of an awareness, because I don't see this as being a cookie cutter approach. This is something that each person has to figure out, what's it worth? What am I willing to give up in order to get something else? And I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but some people, say, yeah, I don't have any money to bank, or I don't have anything to hide, so I don't care if my data is in a breach. I don't care if my stuff's out there. That attitude is very, very prevalent. So yeah, Firefox better than Chrome. I still use Chrome. I have some tools that will only operate on Chrome. Mm-hmm. So again, what's it worth? We investigate some groups that, quite honestly, we will only do on a virtual machine running certain other things that we have, and there is absolutely no other way that we're going after these specific groups. These are international groups, by the way, because they can easily reverse this stuff and come back at us, and that has happened before. So when we're doing that, but we can, and I'm speaking now from the law enforcement side, we can create this level of paranoia where everybody is so afraid, and we've done that with children on their cell phones or on their mobile devices, where parents think they have to control everything. They have to control every aspect, every account, every login, everything that they ever do, to the point where these kids are rebelling, trying to get away, and they're going off getting secondary burner devices and logging in on them. So again, this comes back to where's the balance in this thing? Just because that article said this browser is better than this browser, maybe you agree with them, maybe you don't, but it comes back to what's it worth. I think if we push, we're talking about privacy here for a lot of things. If we push the use of password managers, don't recycle passwords, have a single use email for your password manager, have a single use email for certain other things. If we push that, and don't answer security questions truthfully. I don't know how many times we've run into that on password resets out here from one stalker to the victim. There's so many things that, if we boil it down to a core group of things, if everybody does, it will take care of probably 98% of the problems out here. But you guys are, the super techie, thinking very high level. But anyway, I'm rambling on about this, but hopefully I answered something you asked me, because I don't remember what it was now.